here's another reason why you want to take control of what you're doing.
Everything kind of funnels into the only winning move is not to play the game.
So I got to ask permission to buy the gun, and then I got to pay to ask permission to carry the motherfucker outside of my house. How about you go fuck yourself? You kind of cut it off a little bit there, but yeah.
How you doing, guys?
I even got my fancy fucking hoodie on today. My come and take it grunt style shit. Hell yeah!
I should make one of those.
Yeah, hell yeah. Yeah, because like this, it's kind of like bland, you know, because it's just like, he's got the fucking flag on one side and then it's got this grunt style bullshit, but there's nothing on the back. You pay like $40 for a hoodie that has nothing on the back. It's like, what? You got to say something to people behind you, you know? That's one thing that always upsets me with like a lot of this stuff. When you see like the pop-ups online and stuff like that on social media, you'll see like these cool shirts or whatever, but it'll only be on the back or the front.
Well, if you send that to me, I can put one of those donkey ones that says, "Are you staring at my ass?"
That'd
I
be
can
a
put
good
that
one.
on there. I've got a few of them I haven't used yet.
Yeah, we'll definitely get it taken care of, man, because the future of merchandise is amazingness or horrible, either way you want to go about that. And a lot of the shit that's out here is ridiculous.
Yeah, well, I want to welcome everybody to the podcast. This is the weather report for a Sunday. Yeah. This is episode 7, and we have a special guest today. Shane Hazel, and he's a great guy. I've had him on my show before. If you've been following me, he's been on my show a couple of times before, the Weathered Soul podcast, and I think you've been on the Weathered Soul podcast twice. Shane Hazel is a podcaster. He has a podcast called Radical, and he's got a couple of programs going on. One for veterans called Brave that I've been looking into, and I've been listening to a lot of his stuff. He's also has a podcast called Bitcoin Veterans. Is that correct?
Yeah, we started Bitcoin Veterans last July.
Right. And just want to welcome everybody here. This is a podcast we do every Sunday, 7:00 usually. We're starting a little early today because Shane's there on the East Coast.
On the correct time, on the right side of the country, the right time. Come on, man. Bruce always thinks the world revolves around California and their time. No.
We are sponsored by Horrible Designs, the Music Making Sense podcast, Apex Music Systems, and Mad K Studios. If you're tuning in right now, you can see that Ken is not here today. Ken had a convention or actually a motorcycle show that he was at all day.
Yeah,
it was
Donnie Smith.
The Donnie Smith motorcycle show in someplace in Wisconsin or Minnesota. I don't know, up there in that Canuck area that you guys got up
Canada
there.
area,
And he's pretty busy. He said he had a hoarse voice, so we're gonna let him go for tonight. We got a bunch of stuff we'll say to him tomorrow, or we'll just talk about him after the bonus content.
Yeah, it's all good. We'll just talk about him whenever too. So that Brave, is that anything that has to do with like that Brave browser? Is it connected to that in any way, or does it just happen to be a coincidence?
No, it actually just was one of those things that I came up with in terms of the naming process. Because of the experience that it is, where we go out and do. We can get into that in a little bit if you guys want to, but
yeah, well, why don't we just jump right into that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Shane, since it's like your newest project and something that's really close to your heart. Most of the podcasts that I've heard for you, or any of the other clips and videos that I've seen, you've been really passionate about Brave. You being a veteran yourself, and Harkos and I are veterans, so we're really interested on what you got going on. And let's just go ahead and start with that. What's going on with Brave?
Yeah.
And just tell us about yourself and how you got into Brave and how that came to be.
So Brave came about, like I wasn't one of those guys that ever thought I even had post-traumatic stress. I think it manifests itself, and it has like, it'll manifest itself in different stages of your life. I think it's one of those things where we don't really understand about, or we don't talk about post-traumatic stress. It's either you have it or you don't. And that's not really the case, right? It's like, I think most people have some sort of trauma in their life. It's just life. And at the end of the day, you start to, figure out how you're going to handle that as a, 20-year-old, a 30-year-old, maybe a 40-year-old, and then on to your, later years even. And so as I was going, through life, like I got back, I was extremely high motivation, high work ethic, lots of discipline and everything else. So I didn't really, I didn't have like the nightmares or any of those kind of things. I just was super high high mission oriented still, like, and in doing that, I guess I didn't really realize that was part of my post-traumatic stress. I had just gotten to this point where everything was mission, 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 and nothing was empathy. There was no, like, I was like the Tin Man, like, just everything was point A to point B, and that's all well and good if you're a single guy trying to, you know, go out there and make moves in the world and not let anything hold you back. But once you have a wife and, you know, 3 kids, when you're trying to run a mission from getting to point A to point B, and all those little kids want to do in between is laugh and giggle and everything else, and you see, you know, like, you're still like getting upset or you're frustrated or whatever it is, like, you start to see something and you're like, man, there's something here. Like, there like, now you know, looking back, I can sit there and go, oh, here it is. So I kind of noticed that I had, you know, some things to deal with there, in terms of, you know, programming, brainwashing. I don't know what you want to call it, but the idea was I had to make something else happen. I needed to have more patience. I needed to have more empathy. And, you know, luckily enough for me, I started finding psychedelics in about 2015. I really, you know, I was pretty straight laced growing up. I had, you know, smoked a couple of J's here and there in college, but I mean, seriously, it was a handful of times. And I was getting into jujitsu, and one of the guys who was you know, a few belts ahead of me at the time, he was like, "Hey man, have you ever heard of mushrooms?" And so I was like, "Yeah, I have actually." And, you know, because it is a natural growing, you know, organism here on Earth, I wanted to, you know, I wanted to eventually try them, but I didn't really understand. Like, I wasn't quite there in terms of the understanding of what that was. So we've got some property out here, and he was like, "Hey, you know, if you have a good place to go, and you know, we can spend a morning or, you know, whatever, you know, trying to figure this out, you know, let's do that." So we made some arrangements and we went out. You know, he administered about 2.5 grams of mushrooms, and we went into this really amazing trip at sunrise on Good Friday, which was, I was maybe kind of an easy way to let me into it. And man, I tell you, you know, you witness something that you've never witnessed before, and it's all starting to line up. And anybody who's been through this, not for the drugs, but for the experience, right? Like, you're there for something brand new, the duality of man, the, you know, the cycle that is life, where you kind of fit in this, you know, little part of this, you know, the grand cosmos and everything else out there. But that was obviously the beginning. And I noticed when I came back to the house, I was in an absolute amazing mood. I mean, just over the top. There was nothing wrong in the world. I was very present. And so we did it more, you know, like, we went in, we started making this a thing throughout the hunting season, spring and fall down here. And as I kind of moved my way up, and got to the point where I was like, I need to go do this by myself. I need to go out here and really experience something and see if I can't dive deeper into this. And so I did. It was, you know, 0 dark 30. I took about 8 grams of mushrooms, and I don't recommend this for most people. Like, I live in the Appalachian Mountains out here. There are bear, there are bobcats, there are, you know, a whole bunch of things out here that are creepy and crawly and everything else that don't necessarily want human beings around. And so you got to, I think, you know, in this case, be an outdoorsman. So just word of warning, you know, I'm not going to sit here and condone the use of psychedelics in this fashion for most people. I just don't think it's maybe the right way to go about it. But this was a huge dose for me. It was the biggest dose I'd ever taken. And I went out and I went in, and, you know, there's this, the land out here is very spiritual. It's got a lot of history in it to begin with, you know, dating back 10,000 years in terms of megalithic stones. And so once you start figuring all this out and kind of where you fit in the cosmos and shedding some things, you start to figure out that you've got a much larger purpose, right? Like, you're here for something. You are innately born for something here in this time. And it's like, all right, what is it? What am I trying to figure out? And what should I be doing? And as you start to listen to it and give it some feedback and have some really, you know, strong intentions about what you're doing, it came to me as like, man, there should be something like this for guys all over the planet. And I think that's when I started, getting into the idea of like, hey, this is a technology, right? Like I think of mushrooms now as a technology that can be used for, using hyper-intention and connecting quantumly to the universe. And I think that's something that a lot of people, that do it for recreation totally miss in this whole thing. But when you're using it as, basically a way to plug into the quantum type of energy, the field that's out there, you start to get different things back. And for me, it was one of those things where I was like, hey, you got to start doing this for more and more guys who are interested, because if you can set guys on this path and have them understand where they fit, and to have the ego death, and to now start making apostles of other men, and started introducing this to our culture. This is something that the ancients talked about, and you can go back and read quite a bit in history. But one of the guys that sums it up very nicely is Brian Morosco. He wrote the Key to Immortality. Fantastic book.
Yeah, I've heard him on Joe Rogan a couple times.
He's an amazing guy. And so after I had done this, I was like, dude, I need to kind of consume this guy's work. But the ancients, they were all doing these kind of things, and they actually called it the glue of humanity, which, if you think about it, in today's day and age, the glue of humanity is missing, where we've become more fragmented and segmented, and more combative, and less loving and empathetic and reasonable with each other. And I don't think it's mostly the common man, but obviously the governments that have done some and other organizations, obviously, that have done some really nasty stuff. But yeah, that was the beginning of Brave, and it has kind of grown some legs. We obviously keep it under tight wraps for a reason, and what we're doing right now is more or less looking for the men who are going to lead men. So that's what Brave kind of came about. The naming of it was because of the ancient land that we have behind us, and those people that literally left us megalithic clues as to what happened 10,000 years ago out here. And it's like, we're back. Not only are we back, but we're back here at the same place, probably doing a lot of the same things, hunting like sacred hunting grounds, discovering things, probably maybe mushrooms, and
yeah,
maybe other psychedelics. And to see that human beings have been wiped out over and over and over and pushed back, and then to have this crop up, I was like, to go out and do this, my wife and a few other people were like, that's a pretty brave thing to do while you're doing something like that. And so the name kind of stuck, and that was it.
That's pretty cool. That's something I've listened to Joe Rogan for years, and he touts it, and a lot of the people he's had on, like Brian Murray Rescue, and they've also talked about the book The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross by John Marco Allegro. And I don't know if you've ever checked that one out, but it's an interesting one as well too. It kind of goes back basically to it talks more about how like early Christianity was based on a mushroom fertility cult. It's an interesting book, but I've always had like a curiosity to that and seeing if it could help out with some things up in my head. But I am very paranoid about it, just from, I used to smoke weed here and there and stuff like that. And if I would smoke too much, I would fight it the whole time. It was very uncomfortable. I would actually have anxiety attacks. Now I'm to the point where if I even come around somebody who's like, if I go to somebody's house and they've been smoking, I'll have to leave because I'll start having an anxiety attack just around weed, So I know I got some screws loose from my screws loosed, but that's pretty interesting to actually talk to somebody, because, you hear people talk about it all the time on podcasts and stuff like that, but to actually sit and talk to somebody who's actually been through it, and not because, there's some grungy kid or whatever, what I'm saying, but somebody who's actually doing it with the psychological purpose is pretty interesting.
So Shane, tell us about your tour of duty and how you came about we already heard how you came about the mushrooms and psilocybin and stuff like that. And obviously we're not talking about microdosing right now, but we are talking about some kind of therapy that we're running into an area that's being widely actually, it's being investigated, it's being examined. But what was your tour of duty? So I want to know.
Yeah, I was with the Marine Corps. I was over in the 1st Division with First Force Reconnaissance Company. At the time, we were kind of the premier Special Operations Corps or unit of the Marine Corps. Less than 200 operators in that unit. Usually, we were divided up into about 24, 24-man platoons and six-man groups or teams, if you will. And so I went in right after 9/11, dropped my last year of college, and thought, hey, it'll be here and it'll probably be paid for if I get back. And at that point, went over to the Middle East, and obviously straight out of school, I did very well. Like, I was the honor grad and the guide from day one, going through boot camp, Marine combat training. And then I went up over to jump school because I got selected. They were like, hey man, you want to go jump out of planes? This is like a Lance Corporal level. So I was like, yeah, this seems like the fast track over to recon. And that was my whole goal, is to get into recon. So went out there, got into a parachute MOS for air delivery, went through Fort Bragg, which is an Army school. And they had a Marine Corps detachment up there. So I graduated number 1 in the class again. And they basically asked me, like, what do you want to do? And I told them, hey, if you got a slot out at First Force Reconnaissance, like, let me go.
Right.
Cause they couldn't promote me to corporal at the time or anything. So I let my reward be more, suck and hard work and everything else. But it was worth it. In terms of inexperience, those are the guys I wanted to operate with. Like, I wanted to operate with the most amazing guys in the Marine Corps. And I thought those were the guys. So fast forward to, I guess, late 2002, early 2003, we were sent in to Kuwait, not Kuwait. Kuwait first, to Camp Commando out there. Ali Salim was the airbase that was supporting our area over there. And so we went in, and then, I guess it was right around my brother's birthday. I think it was like March 18th when they cut the berm. We had already had guys surrendering and all that kind of stuff. First thing, Kuwaitis were coming over and waving white flags, and we're like, hey, go back. We're not coming yet. Like, you can't surrender if we're not at war. And so
I just want to get it out of the way.
Yeah, we had an objective to take this place called Safflon Hill, which was in the south. It was a high point. It was a radio tower. And by the time we got there, the aircraft had already basically wiped out everybody and everything there. And at that point, we kind of got in line with the rest of the division and started moving our way north, and found out very quickly that reconnaissance on a battlefield like that was not going to be the same. So we did a lot of overwatch during the first deployment. Once we made it up to Baghdad, we were taking in buildings, going after some of the Republican Guard, all that nonsense. And then that got cut short. Our platoon anyway, we got chosen to get redeployed. So we got detached from our company and got redeployed back to the States in early May. And we ended up doing another short workup, no school phase this time, just a green side and a dark side workup is what they call it. And at that point, early April 2004, we were back on the 11th MEU, headed back to the Middle East. And usually, for anybody that doesn't understand, a Marine Expeditionary Unit, usually from the west side, is called a Westpac. And you go out, you see Hawaii, you see Thailand and Singapore, and maybe stop in the Seychelles, maybe Horn of Africa, maybe pop into the Middle East for a little bit, then down through Australia. And by the time you get back, it's been 6 months, and you get off the boat and you go home. It's kind of like it used to be a Liberty cruise, right? You just had a great time. Well, we stopped in Hawaii, slept in the field for 4 days while everybody else went on libo in Hawaii. And we're sleeping out in the field next to the volcanoes training, which, I got to say, looking back on it, that was actually pretty cool to be able to say, hey, you know what, you've spent more days camping on Hawaii than you have, sleeping in a shelter or anything like that. But yeah, we got over for the second run, man. And I will tell you, the boats dropped us off in Kuwait. We never saw them again. We got flown up to a place called Najaf, and Najaf is the home of the second holiest site in all of Islam. It's the Imam Ali Shrine out there. It's got the Abraham Cemetery, which goes on for miles and miles and miles, underground and above ground. There's catacombs everywhere, tunnels, you name it. Not the place, fun memories are made. So as soon as we were on deck and took control from the Army and the Spanish in the area, we started a fight with Muqtada al-Sadr, and that was the Battle of Najaf. I think that was early August when that kicked off, and so we went through the Battle of Najaf. Luckily, everybody was fine through that, at least from our platoon. There were a couple of Marines that did die, obviously a lot more with, just injuries and all that fun stuff. And then we got attached after that battle to the Operational Detachment Alpha, which was a Army SF group. If a lot of people know them as the A-Team out there because of the TV shows. But at the time, Donald Rumsfeld had said, Force Recon is going to become MARSOC at some point. You guys are going to be transferring over. You guys need to go learn this game of special operations. So my team specifically, 6 guys, went over, started working with the ODA team in Najaf, training a bunch of ISF, Iraqi Special Forces guys. And it was a short-lived gig. By the end of October, we were being called up now as a platoon again to go and do the battlefield reconnaissance for Fallujah in November. So this would be the second round of Fallujah in 04. So we did we not only did the breach points and battlefield shaping for those guys going into there, but then because 3-1 and 1-3 and 1-8 all took some pretty heavy blows, especially 3-1, the battalions over there. Our captain happened to have come from 3-1, and he was like, hey, we're 24 guys, we know some stuff, maybe we can attach to you guys and maybe help you guys clear some houses. So we ended up kicking in doors most of the time in Fallujah, and showing guys, new explosive techniques, going through different, doors and everything, like I should say different techniques and getting into houses. So, and we invented a few along the way. So Fallujah 04 was kind of the culmination of everything. And that's where, I think, Bruce, we've had that conversation before, where when I got back from this, and I mean, you see some shit in that place that you just,
especially that second round of Fallujah, that was a fucking crazy one.
Oh, it was a fist fight, man. And it was door to door. Literally kicking in thousands of doors. And as the point man, like, you don't let the young 18-year-olds do it. Like I was all of 24 at that time. So kind of an old man, old crusty corporal compared to those guys. And I was a pretty big guy, and kicking indoors was kind of fun. But, after a couple thousand of them, you think your luck's running out, and you're just ready to be done with that whole mission. So we got done with that, and I found this book back in my tent on my bed. And it was a John Taylor Gatto book, The Underground History of American Education. And as I read through it, he talked about things like the education system in America coming from Prussia, 1700s progressive Prussia.
Yeah, we had talked about that on the Daily Show a few days back.
How it was used to kind of mold and shape an entire population into a homogenous mindset to move it, the discretion of the bankers and the warlords and the industry and the government. And you're sitting there going like, damn it, they fucking got me. And at that point, you'd seen some stuff, so the gig was up, and you're just like, man, I can't get out of here fast enough. And I had no idea what being a conscientious objector was at that time. You could request mass, but nobody talked to you about like being a conscientious objector. So it was late February before we left that battle space, so almost a full year, in terms of a deployment. And I got to tell you, that was long enough for me. I'd seen enough stuff, and I think about most of the platoon read that book by the time we had gotten back. And I think everybody besides the gunnies and up, most of them retired at that point. They were like, we're done.
So tell me a little bit about PTSD and the clients that you have, the association that you have with some of the people that you've worked with. I know that you I listened to the podcast right after you guys got done with your experience in the wilderness there. It was pretty humorous, but basically it was soul searching too. So I mean, it opened up a lot for me. I've done psilocybin before, so I'm aware of how enlightening it can be, and you have to do it in the right frame of mind, in the right area and stuff like that. But when you're dealing with PTSD, which I do, unfortunately, I do not know a lot about it. There's many people that do have it, and I was just curious about when do you discover it? How does it manifest itself? And is there a root to it that you can get to? And is the psilocybin, is that trying to get to that root of that to make you realize where it's at?
Yeah, a wise man once talked about the identity of trauma and what do you do with it? Do you learn from it, or do you become a victim of it? Do you use it as a like, hey, the shiny badge in this bullshit culture that fiat has given us, or do you learn from it? And one of the things that I have these guys obviously understand is kind of back to this John Taylor Gatto moment. If you can point to kind of what your trauma was, and I hope most people can, like, there are some people that can't because there's too many of them, right? Like there's so much trauma that maybe dad was not around, maybe stepdad was a drunk, and he beat people and he was molesting people, and God knows there are some people that just dealt with trauma since day one, who swallowed it down, they've internalized it. But for a lot of guys with with where we've been and gone to, their traumas are, generally they stem from things that happened overseas. And so if we can point to those things and be like, okay, man, this is what it is, right? Like let's learn why that happened first and foremost. And one of the great things that this, especially the John Taylor Gatto segment does, is it takes you back to an age where you were an innocent person, right? It takes you back to the time you were 5 years old, when the American, indoctrination system gets their hands on you. When the American indoctrination gets their hand on you, like when you're 5 years old, you start to have this ability to be like, man, you never had a chance. You never had a fighting chance at spotting this, because you were innocent. You didn't know that this is the way adults worked. You didn't know that they plotted and they schemed and they did things for, not you, not America, not for, the red, white, and blue, not for liberty, not for freedom, not for any of these things. And that's what they indoctrinated you with from the time you were 5 until the time you were 18 when you graduated, maybe longer if you went on to, secondary education and all that fun stuff. But like, when you can take a person back to that age and you can say, hey, look, man, it's okay. Like, it's not like whatever horrors you've seen, whatever horrors that you've visited on other people, like, man, I'm sorry, but like you had a false understanding of the world. It's like being in a fishbowl and not understanding that there's a larger world out there. When you're told all the time that, hey, America does no wrong, we were the back-to-back champions of World War I and World War II, and you didn't, you never heard the real truth about what Korea or Vietnam was, or what was going on in Desert Storm, Desert Shield the first time around, and then all of a sudden you get hit by some crazies that go push into some a couple towers. It's your first instinct, as it was mine, was to be like, hey man, let's go make sure that we send a message that this never happens again. So if you can bring people down to that spot and now they can learn, man, now you've got somebody who's going to actively not only understand but forgive themselves. And I think a lot of what trauma is getting out of your own way, forgiving yourself, and then looking at how do we address this problem now, right? And that's one of the amazing things that Brave does, is like, we're not asking people to come out here and just like go through an experience and feel good, right? Like, no, like what's the next step? What are you plugging yourself into? What passion, what mission are you going to find from this kind of stuff? And then how are you going to go execute these things so that these things don't happen to other people? Because it's like, if some guy's out there and, he wants to rape a lady and she's got the ability to put him down right then and there, and she says, oh, it's just me. And, and says, hey, I'd rather not take his life. Well, how many more lives is that guy going to go out traumatized? We have to like start having men of passion and, faith of whatever sort you want. I think psilocybin kind of works with all of them, no matter what it is. But if you have real men in this day and age stand up and say, hey, no, look, this pedophilia shit, It's done. This corruption shit, it's done. All of this evil stuff that's going on in the world, it's fucking done. And we're going to start rooting it out. And we're going to do it in ways that you guys don't understand or can't stop. And a lot of that, I think, comes back from that quantum realm with us. When you start using like these quantum powers that nobody talks about except for in this space, this psychedelic space.
Right.
When you start to change your vibration and you start to match that vibration up with what you want to see in the world, and then you start taking guys that are straight up killers, like, I mean, savage guys that can turn it on, turn it off, that would rather be the gardener, the warrior in the garden versus, the gardener in the war kind of guy, but he doesn't want to act in a overt way anymore. You start taking those guys that have tons and tons of skill sets and then setting them on a mission with that quantum knowledge of what they can change in terms of energy, being light and love, both high forms of frequency and power. Then you start to really, really tap into some things that these people don't understand, that prevail in the shadows, in the dark. They don't want that kind of smoke. They don't want that kind of heat. Like, it is a super powerful thing. And that's what we're doing. We're putting together a group of cadre now that are not only understanding of this, but are now walking in that direction.
Fantastic, man. So are you getting any kind of pushback from anybody else with the program, or is it pretty much freestanding the way it is, and you guys are making progress as you go along?
Yeah, we're making a lot of progress. And, we're very tight. It's one of those things where, there's a lot of, I guess there's a lot of name recognition that goes into this kind of thing. And I say name recognition, like, you're not just going to show up off the street and like, oh, hey, can I be part of this? Like, it's going to have to be somebody who sticks out, and like, we're picking those people along the way, and then they're going to go lead, and they're going to go plant seeds, and they're going to grow networks, and they're going to do the same. Like, this is going to be probably a generational project, I think, but it's definitely started. It's growing legs, and it is extremely powerful, because I can tell you from what that 8-gram trip that I had out there was a vision that I had, and it was do brave, understand why it's going to work, understand how it's going to work, understand who it's going to work with, and then go. And so since, I don't know, 2021 sometime, early 2021, that's when I had that vision. And since then, Bitcoin Veterans has been born. It's grown into this monster that I can't even keep up with now, which is amazing. And it's kind of got legs of its own, and we're doing stuff all over the world now.
Well, fantastic. We got all your links down there in the show notes for tonight, so anybody can go down there. I've got the marquee going right now. You can go to www.radicalpod.com/brave to find out a little bit more about it. He's got his contact information there, and I'm sure that he would answer any questions that you have. We're going to switch gears right now, because you're also you work for Swan Bitcoin, and we wanted to talk about Bitcoin tonight. And it's one of the things that I've been requested on many times when I restarted the podcast, and I do post a lot about Bitcoin. I'm a Bitcoin maximalist, as I know that Shane is. He is my account executive, but I'm small coin to him, because he works with some real high dollar people in Bitcoin. And actually, I wanted to share a couple of things, because I've got 2 items that I wanted to show you. One of them was posted by Swan Bitcoin and Michael Gaither, and a conversation that he had on the Conversations with Tom podcast. I want to run that real quick, and then I've got another story that I want to kind of read out on kind of the counter argument, or counter what's going on with Bitcoin right now. So just give me a second. We'll run that. And
give you a bunch of money, and I tell you, you want to keep it and give it to your grandchild. Do you buy a building in Manhattan? Do you buy a ranch in California? Do you buy a stack of gold bars? Do you buy shares in a company headquartered in San Francisco? Do you buy bonds issued by a government or a company? or do you buy Bitcoin? And you can see the problem, of course, is the debt is devaluing rapidly. The land in California can be taxed and is not movable. The building in New York's not going anywhere. It might be valuable to a rich person that lives in New York. What about a rich person that lives in Beijing? Do they want your building in New York? How are you going to hide your building, right? Buildings get property taxed. There's a very famous story about, a bunch of luxury, yachts sitting in Sardinian port, and the locals decided that it wasn't fair that all these rich people were sitting on their yachts in the port, spending all this money, but they weren't paying enough taxes. Now they're putting millions and millions of euros into the economy, but they came up with the idea that they were going to put a tax on the yacht, on the value of the yacht. And so they passed a yacht tax that would have cost people millions or tens of millions of euros if they stayed in that port. And everything was happy, and all the restaurateurs and the hotelers and the entertainment people in the port, they were all happy, making tons of money off the yachts until the day before the tax went into place. And the morning that the tax went into place, the port was empty and the economy died. Everybody left because yachts are floating capital. It just moves. It's floating property, right? So it's a very visible example, right? Why it's not that smart to put an unfair tax or an extreme tax on a yacht if people can float the yacht to the next port, 100 miles to the left. So one would be discouraged from taxing stuff that floats. On the other hand, taxing a building that's buried, 100 feet down in the bedrock, that's easier. You can't move the building. So Bitcoin represents the apex property rights of the human race.
So that is very telling of what I've been trying to explain to my cohorts here, that Bitcoin is hard money. And unfortunately, Ken's not here, so we'll let him, he can't ask his questions that he wanted to tonight. But one of the biggest things that I wanted to say was that there's a difference between what we call fiat, the money that we spend every day, the property that we own, that we pay property tax on, just all the stationary things and even the mobile things that we have. There's so much involved in what actual Jack Spirko would say. If we have fiat cash, we're getting fiat consumables, and it's just permeates in every single thing that you've got. And what Michael Saylor, who is if nobody knows who Michael Saylor is, he is the CEO of MicroStrategy, and he's one of the guys that owns probably some of the most Bitcoin of everybody. I mean, he's trying to acquire more and more on a daily basis. But yeah, so you being a proponent of Bitcoin, you're a Bitcoin maximalist just like me. I'm a Bitcoin only guy. I don't own any other cryptocurrencies. I just wanted to know, number one, how'd you get into it? Where are you going with Bitcoin? How do you feel about it? There's many questions that we have, and we just want to kind of start there.
Yeah, so I mean, I was not that guy. I mean, from my Marine Corps days, obviously, I kind of understood what was coming here in America a long time ago. I started listening to Ron Paul in 2008, and the guy obviously knew economics. Absolutely, I mean, just cold. And I was, how do you learn this kind of stuff in the face of everything that's out there? And luckily for me, the Mises Institute was born. If you guys aren't familiar with the Mises Institute, or your audience isn't, the Mises Institute is a Austrian school of economics, and it is fantastic. Tons of free stuff in there to read and peruse, and just a bunch of bright minds over there that maintain the center. But I started going down the Austrian rabbit hole a long time ago, got into obviously the hard metals, gold and silver, started trying to take as much money as I could out of the banks because I just didn't trust them. And, knowing where we were going, fiat always collapses, and it always collapses suddenly. And you're trying to time it was just one of those things. So like I said, I moved me and my family out of suburban America in late 2019. Kind of was like, this is it, honey. Like, we have to go. The everything bubble is going to burst. We need to have a some space. We need to have some chickens, and we need to have a lot of lead and silver and gold on our hands. So I was already kind of flirting around with Bitcoin at the time. I was trying to learn as much as I could about trading and markets and all that kind of stuff, because I just, I didn't want to work for somebody the rest of my life. And I watched the block wars go on in 2017, and they were kind of having the same problem as the Libertarian Party, which I was also, flirting around with in that same time frame. And as I was doing this, I guess it was probably about that 2019 time frame, Alex Svetsky started poking me and said, "Hey, dude, I like what you're talking about, but you got to learn Bitcoin." And so I was like, dude, I'm not interested in your digital funny money shit. Like, if it's zeros and ones, like people can copy fucking codes and get the fuck out of here. But he was persistent and he was smart, and he kept poking me. And it was one of those things where I was like, fine, I'll fucking read your book or your article, or what do you need me to do so you'll leave me the fuck alone, kind of stuff. And so I did, and I was like, oh my God. Like the more once it, like the light bulb went on, and I went through it, and I was like, this is Austrian economics and code. And it's this thing where if you want to play and it's incentivized the right way, then there's nobody that can take your assets ever again. And then I started learning, like, oh my, like these guys that built this were, coming out of the 2008 crash, and there was obviously attempts before that to do it, but Bitcoin's just the one that stuck with the longest chain in terms of an incorruptible ledger, and they never changed it. And you're like, this is incredible, almost too good to be true, right? Like you're just where's the other shoe? Like you're just waiting for it to drop the entire time. I think it was probably early 2020 when I started having a lot of time to just pour into it because of COVID. And, I spent 2020, 2021 just devouring as much Bitcoin content as I possibly could with all the free time that I had. And at that time, I became absolutely convinced, exited the fiat system completely during that time, and got into Bitcoin, pretty much full time. And then I guess I retired in late 2022. And I had already been talking to Swan for a while, and they were in a bear market at the time. And then the bull market hit. And that's when Alex Stanzik, who ran the Cafe Bitcoin podcast for a long time, came to me. He's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I just stood up a Bitcoin concierge business on my own. He's like, "Why don't you come over here and work for us?" And I said, "Deal." So yeah, been slinging Bitcoin for Swan since July of last year, and it's been amazing.
Yeah, you caught me about, 3 years ago now? I think it's been since I've started my first Bitcoin journey. Yeah. I've been hodling since, and got me into my first wallet, and I haven't looked back. So there's a bunch of questions going on. I know Harkos has got a question, so I'm going to let him take over the table.
So I got a question about this Bitcoin halving. So when traditionally, like in stocks, whenever you have a stock split, it increases the amount of stock available. And with Bitcoin, this halving is supposed to be similar, but how can that be possible when there's a finite amount of Bitcoin? Am I completely fucking lost in the sauce?
Yeah, it's okay though.
Okay.
Let's
well, I mean, because when you think about the halving, you're like, oh, okay, so it's going to be a stock split.
There's a great meme out there, right? It's like when in a regular fiat market, right? And actually in any commodities market ever, when there was so much demand, people are like, "Hey man, you gotta increase your supply, right? And increase your price as well." Well, that's not exactly what Satoshi had in mind. And there's a great meme where they say that, "Hey, you gotta amp up the production of Bitcoin." And it goes, half, like that's it, you're going to get half. And so this is what they call the block reward. So for every time a Bitcoin block is thrown onto the chain, it's a 10-minute block. So that 10-minute block, you can think of it as just in real time all the transactions that take place in Bitcoin during that 10-minute block. And so now they're running algorithms trying to guess numbers, And as they guess it, they're rewarded right now. They're rewarded 6.25 Bitcoin for every 10-minute block. That comes out to about 900 a month. In the beginning, they were rewarding, I think it was somewhere around 50 Bitcoin for every 10-minute block. And the reason that was to get people incentivized early and then to taper it off towards the end. So there is still issuance, but it's not inflation, because the number is set in code. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin ever mined, but that mining goes through a halving every 4 years. And so from 6.25, we'll drop down to 3.15 here in April, which obviously takes it down to 450 a month. At that point, what you're talking about is more and more scarcity. And so as more and more scarcity builds in this inelastic commodity, the price of Bitcoin, as more and more people come to it from fiat and the market cap swells, you're going to see some pretty amazing things happen to the purchasing power of Bitcoin.
So
let me hold on real quick.
The amount of Bitcoin, the finite amount, hasn't already been created, and that's what the mining does.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, let me clarify one thing. So when we're talking about the halving, we're talking about the amount of Bitcoin that the miners are receiving for mining the Bitcoin. It's not the amount that people that are buying Bitcoin are getting. So the thing the balances balance out to where Bitcoin will rise as the scarcity goes down. My one question about the halving and what's going on, because we're going to get into more kind of basic stuff after this question, but as we go through another halving, which is going to be down the road, where we start splitting it from 3.15 down to 1.5 down to 0.75, what is the incentive, and is that built in? Were we thinking about, or was Satoshi thinking about the incentive of mining Bitcoin that far down the road? Was that his plan to create the scarcity that we have to make Bitcoin a viable hard money? Because right now, I think a lot of people, and we'll get into this basic thing here in a minute, where people think that they have to buy a Bitcoin when actually they're buying Satoshis.
Yeah.
So if you can clarify.
Yeah, I guess we should probably start. The decimal is just the beginning of, so the 21 million is just the beginning of this, of a Bitcoin. There's no Satoshis in the white paper. He never mentions Satoshis or fractions.
Right.
He still called it just Bitcoin. The cypherpunks, I think, came up with the name Satoshi in honor of Satoshi Nakamoto for doing this. So there are 100 million sats. Is it 100 million sats for
100 million sats?
100 million sats off, 100 million sats per Bitcoin, which obviously you can put as many damn decimal places behind, I should say, you can put it as many zeros as you want behind that decimal place as you want to. So in terms of owning an entire Bitcoin, most people won't. And in fact, here's some fun, statistics for everybody, is there are 45 million millionaires in the US alone, and most of them will never own a Bitcoin, first and foremost. The fact that 93.5% of Bitcoin has already been mined. Now we're going to not mine the last Satoshi until 2140, which means that about 8 billion people on Earth from now until 2140 are going to share about 6.5% of the Bitcoin that's left to be mined. So you can start to really do the math in terms of where we're at in this time scale. Like, we've barely just begun. Most of that needs to be traded. A lot of it needs to be reinvested to grow the Bitcoin network. And in terms of, taking this thing and moving it into a real currency where people are, going to be using this on a daily basis, there's got to be widespread adoption. But we're kind of in that black swan moment. I think Biden just signed the $1.2 trillion spending bill to keep the government from shutting down in the dark of the night. When you're spending over $1 trillion every 100 days, this is not sustainable. Our debt to GDP ratio right now is, I think, 130%. You don't come back from these things. Like, they have to print their way out of this, which is going to absolutely kill everybody else. Well, when you have the opportunity to still buy Bitcoin, because you do, at some point you won't be able to, because you'll have to work for it. it's still fairly early. The ETFs have barely gotten around, and those are small ETFs. So I mean, you don't have to front run. You don't get to front run them anymore. But you're to the point where the money's starting to come in, and I think we're at a $1.3 trillion market cap right now.
Mm-hmm.
To give you an idea, gold is a $10 trillion market cap. And once we get to $10 trillion in Bitcoin, you're talking about $2 million, give or take, for a Bitcoin.
Yeah, we just basically surpassed silver in their market cap probably about 2 weeks ago, if I remember right. And and then these ETFs come into play that I'm not sure how you care about ETFs. It really didn't matter to me which way they wanted to go to me. You could do ETFs. I don't care. Doesn't matter. But the one thing that I come across with the FUD of most people are just going like, they have to buy this. They have to buy a Bitcoin. They have to buy a whole Bitcoin. I can't afford 65,000 or 66,000 right now. I can't buy a Bitcoin. I can't afford that. Well, I say, no, you can buy Satoshis, and it's just, and they're like, that throws them a curve. It's like, what's a Satoshi?
Yeah.
I people don't hear about those.
I wish they call them bits or something, or like just some smaller form, or just keep it Bitcoin and be like, hey, you're buying a fraction of a Bitcoin. But when you start doing the math, a fraction of a Bitcoin in the future is going to be a hell of a lot of money, depending on when you got it.
Right. When you think about the complexity of what you said, you've got 100 million Satoshis that make one Bitcoin. When you span that out over 21 million Bitcoin, you've got 21 quadrillion Satoshis out there.
2.1 quadrillion.
And we haven't even, I thought it was weird that we surpassed into a trillion in debt and being able to spend trillions. And now we're talking about quadrillions out there for Bitcoin. To me, it's a fear that one of these days we're going to get to a quadrillion in debt. That's
a lot of people don't know this, but the total addressable market for Bitcoin is actually 900 trillion. So you're actually you're approaching it. But a lot of people also don't know that the derivative market in this space, just for fiat in general. So all the different money making, schemy, shitty ways that they take advantages of people out there, there is literally $1.5 quadrillion in that market, which will all come unwound, which will all come unglued, and also push into this theater. So as fiat comes undone, and as it continues to print people out of jobs and homes and cars and a lifestyle, those people are going to be looking for a harder asset to store their most valuable asset, which is time.
Yeah. So you got a guy like me, but you deal with a lot of high worth accounts. What kind of questions and worries do you get from those people that are really investing big time in Bitcoin instead of just a hodler like me who, I buy X amount a week, and that's what I do, and that's how I do my stack. But there's people out there that are actually, putting in big money, and especially, you handle those accounts. What kind of questions, what kind of fears do they have?
If they're new to Bitcoin, I think a lot of the FUD that gets them, what if the government does something? I think is their biggest question. I want to balance my portfolio. I'm worried about the risk of Bitcoin. How can you help me understand this? And maybe what is it? Really, what is Bitcoin in terms of trying to just wrap their head around the idea of like people trading digital property. They don't understand that aspect of it all. So there's a gamut of questions, because I handle everybody that's been a Bitcoiner for a long time to the guy that just is freaking out about the idea that they're printing trillions and trillions of dollars, and one of his best friends who has just made 200% in the last year on Bitcoin said, hey, dumbass, what are you doing with all that money that you made? They're taking it from you through inflation. Why don't you put it in Bitcoin? And if that guy is doing extremely well, and he knows he's doing extremely well, that's the guys that I have that are moving a lot of weight, and it's just it's the normal questions. It's the same questions that somebody has, $20,000 IRA as somebody that has a $2 million IRA. It's just one of those very primitive, fearful places. And to be fair to everybody out there, this is something new. You've survived in a fiat system your entire life. You've gotten to whatever age you are right now, and you've survived in a fiat system. So there's something in that, that primordial brain going, it's safe here. I'm okay here. But there's also something that's, starting to go off. And now you're talking about like the duality of man. And they're going, no, it isn't safe here anymore. And you need to start moving some things into this, what is very scary because it's unknown, type of bearer asset. And it's a lot for a lot of people. We have some pretty amazing conversations on a daily basis.
What about when you look at the history of Bitcoin and how last time it was at 60 something, it crashed to 15?
Yeah. So we kind of thought it was being suppressed at the time in terms of short circuited, and obviously when you have a low market cap, let's just say somewhere between 800 and 600 billion dollars, which is a small market cap. If anybody's playing around with funds, which they were, right? So the guys over at FTX were obviously playing around. The guys at Binance have been playing around. The guys at Coinbase have been playing around, but they've got some secret deal with BlackRock and the Fed, which are basically the same guys, right? And so when you're playing around with these securities and doing securities fraud, money laundering with some of the most powerful people in the world, they have requests, and one of those requests is, okay, when you're doing all this kind of stuff, let's try everything we can to make this stuff as cheap as possible so that when we do have to come around to it, we can buy up a ton of it. So what did FTX do? They dumped a ton of it, and then they testified in a court of law just recently saying, yeah, we were actually trying to suppress the price. And so as somebody who was new to Bitcoin, kind of during that time, but got it, I was like, oh my God, the prices are coming way down. This is amazing, right? Because I understood what it was. It was an opportunity to scoop up Bitcoin at $15,000. It was like, all right, what kid do I need to sell? No, I'm kidding. But like it's when you get to that point, right? You're just like, hey, we're gonna do without some things for a while. We're gonna sell some things. We're gonna stop spending some things. We are gonna put everything that we can, because I thought this era was gone. Finding Bitcoin under $20,000. Are you crazy? For some people that didn't do the studying, that didn't understand it, and they were just like, oh my God, I just put in so much money, at the all-time high, and then it just, your purchasing power got wiped out for a little while, but then bam, it's back. It's at 200,000. And the thing is as more people come to it, there's going to be a higher market cap. That the ups and downs are going to smooth out. The larger the market cap you have, the better. Like I said, I think we're headed for gold here in the very near future.
Well, that's volatility.
Yeah, the volatility is going to smooth out, and you would have to literally move trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars in a single move to make the volatility really do anything. And the volatility for us, when you really look at it, it's just the volatility has always gone up. Over time. You just got to zoom out with Bitcoin. You can't sit there and watch the dailies or even the monthlies, probably not even the yearlies. 4-year increments is really kind of what you want to watch in Bitcoin. And if you're not watching at least 4 years or more, you're missing the big picture. The big picture is this is the hardest bearer asset the world has ever seen. It's digital. It moves faster than fiat does, cheaper than fiat, without any friction of states, unlike fiat. And then it's harder than gold in terms of its preservation of thermodynamics. So both, if you start thinking about Bitcoin as technology, fiat was technology that beat gold because you could move it faster around the planet in a global technology because of telecommunications. Gold was great for a long time because it was decentralized and we didn't have the telecommunications, and it worked in terms of trade. This combines the security, I should say, well, it's better than gold in terms of frequency and half-life than both gold and fiat. So it's got the best of the qualities and not the worst, and none of the worst of their qualities.
So how do you approach people like myself who are basically living week to week, just eat when we kill type of situation just to get by? about you talking about Bitcoin stuff like that. It's like, okay, well, can I buy groceries with it? Can I buy gas with it? Can I pay my mortgage with it?
Yeah.
Can I pay my electric bill with it? You know, because I mean, if I get paid in it, okay, cool. Now I got to cash it out into dollars in order to do it. But then if I get paid today in it and it's 65 a coin, right? And I get paid, you know, $300 worth or whatever, right? From somebody when I do like a website for them or whatever, right? And then, you know, on at the end of the month when I go to pay my mortgage or whatever, it dropped down to 45. Well, now I just lost. I'm only now I got like $250 basically to cash out. You know, so now I just lost money. So like that volatility right there keeps somebody away from using it as a currency. And then especially since somebody like myself don't really have much to put into it as an investment, especially when we see the volatility, it's like, why would I put money into it right now at the all-time high when last time it was at the all-time high, it dropped down to 15? Why don't I just wait till 15 or 20 and then put money into it?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I'll tell people is, listen, don't put in money that you need, right? Like this has just got to be purely savings. You don't look at this, just leave it the hell alone. First and foremost, I don't care if it's 25 cents a day, if it's 50 cents a day, $1, $5, $10, $20, whatever it is that you can put in a day comfortably and still meet whatever it is that you need. Like maybe you're not getting that coffee. Maybe, you know, like I quit coffee, for God's sakes. Like I'm not drinking this coffee because now I'm going to put it towards something else, right? Whatever it is that you can start to live a more Spartan-esque life, like maybe start doing some of those things to find whatever you can in terms of liquidity to put it in there. So first and foremost, don't put in what you need to spend on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. Rule number one, put it in whatever you have in liquidity that you can put it in there and leave it the hell alone. This is your rainy day stuff. Never, ever, ever touch it, ever. That's the rule. The other side of that is there's a couple of different ways in terms of Bitcoin, in terms of practical application to use Bitcoin. It's not just for stacking, I don't think anyway. And I don't think you create an economy in Bitcoin without actually spending it and using it.
Yeah, transactions for it to be a currency. Yeah.
That's right. And so that's where we want to go. So maybe that's where we need to do a little more work as Bitcoiners. And I think, you know, the way my family's figured it out is with a cold savings device, or, you know, there's a few names: cold wallets, cold storage, signing devices. They're all the same thing. Basically, let's just call this your savings account. This is the thing that you have 24 seed words for, or 12 seed words, depending on who you are. You put that as your vault. Like this is the savings account vault that nobody, you know, knows about. You don't talk about it. You don't do anything with that thing. That thing sits over there, whether it's a single signature or multi-signature or collaborative multi-sig, whatever it is, that stays over there, period. Now, in this day and age, there is this beautiful app called Cash App, and, you know, I'll shill for these guys. I'm not going to say it's perfect. I'm not going to say there couldn't be improvements, but for what it is, this is one of Block's products. Jack Dorsey, if you guys know Jack Dorsey, the guy that created Twitter, I think he's actually coming back to trying to undo some of the things that he did back in the day, or at least let happen. And so with Cash App, you can receive your paycheck in Bitcoin if you want to. I'm not saying you should, because if it's tight and you got volatility, and now all of a sudden, you know, you're down by $5,000, man, that's going to create a lot of havoc between you and whatever significant other that you may depend on to
or even just the bank.
There you go. But if let's just say you get to that point where you're like, all right, man, I can have some Satoshis in this wallet, right? Because it will do Bitcoin on chain and on Lightning. So for us, the way we do it is, man, I've seen it in a bull market where the positives pay off over time, right? Because if I get paid and I put my paycheck into a Cash App, and there's no spread or anything like that, it just goes straight into the Cash App. At that point, what I can do is now experience all the ups, maybe a little bit of downs along the way, but mostly ups. And over time, I'm getting more ups than I am getting down. So I can take that, I can sell Bitcoin on the spot while I'm at the gas pump or at the grocery store. And then I can use my debit card or my Apple Pay to pay with that Cash App card right then and right there on the spot, while experiencing all the gains on the way up. And what will happen over the months you'll see, man. You'll see that, man. I've accumulated more. I mean, let's think about it. If you did this last year and you were doing this practice, whatever satoshis that you had in that Cash App, instead of it being in fiat, were in Bitcoin, they went up by 200%.
Mm-hmm.
You literally have 200% more satoshis over that time than you would have had you just left it in fiat. So it's like, all right, how do I find a way to do this? How do I start doing this? And then if you can balance those worlds and still leave those satoshis alone for the most part, right? Like, hey, listen, it's going to change your mindset in terms of like how you spend money. Do I need this product? Do I need this thing? Do I need to go out here and do this on this, Friday or Saturday night? You start looking at a longer time horizon, and that longer time horizon is what really pays off in terms of like discipline, and really at the end of the day, your freedom. Because if it's storing your time is one of those things that you can't get back. And a perfect thermodynamic storage of it in a deflationary type of asset is going to go up over time versus gold, silver, stocks, bonds. All of these just leak like sieves because of inflation. It's why these guys that got rich during COVID or more rich during COVID is why they get rich, is because the entire system is designed for those guys.
Mm-hmm.
So Shane, we hope that you have a little bit more time to spend with us tonight. We're going to do a little bonus content. We're up against a hard stop, but I want to give you a chance to go ahead and plug what you got going on. I've been running the marquee down there for your website. We do have all the show notes in the show notes wherever you're at, whether you're going to be viewing this on YouTube, Rumble, or on our podcast apps tomorrow morning. But go ahead and do that, and then we're going to run off into some bonus content.
Okay. Yeah. Bitcoin Veterans is awesome. It's a growing network, whether you're a veteran or not, and come check it out. We're doing everything from Brave behind the scenes. We're doing Operation Bitcoin, which is it's a kind of a skills program for people who are transitioning out of the military or already out of the military to go into the Bitcoin workforce. We're doing those things. We're running Citadel networks where people are talking about standing up localities and I don't want to say compounds. That's a negative connotation, but working within areas to network in Bitcoin type of communities for security and communications, food growing, trade, you name it. We're doing all that. Then we're also doing ham radio networks on top of it. So check out Bitcoin Veterans. We're doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes. Civilians obviously welcome. Radical and Bitcoin Veterans are both the podcasts. And then if you need help with Bitcoin, you can contact me over at Swan. You can email me, shane.hazel@swanbitcoin.com. I'll be happy to kind of walk you through some stuff, or at least get you in the good hands over there. And that's kind of what I got going these days.
Great, man. Well, I thank you again for coming on the show, man. You're always a wealth of knowledge, and we're always happy to have you here. We're going to end this one, and then we're going to start another feed for some bonus content for our listeners that are going to listen in next week, with then hopefully answer the rest of the questions that they have, man. Again, thank you for coming on the show, man. We really appreciate it. For me and Harkos and Jason and Ken, who is not here, we got to wish you guys a good night and be good to yourselves. Take care, guys.